science number today. This is actually a science lesson plan that I'm going to run. Lori's seen it, that I was going to run with Lori's class, but other 10th grade science teachers, if you get excited about it, feel free to chime in and I'll run it with you as well. That kind of deals with ethics, and it does a little overlap with ecology and pH as well. Very quickly before we start, so you can do your little raffle ticket, my session is the PBL unit planning framework, so I kind of sit on top of every other session. They kind of feed into mine. And the first thing for your raffle ticket, I had way too much coffee, I'm a little jittery, is take your slip and take what components make up a good lesson plan. So what components do you know make up a good lesson plan? So take like a minute, maybe 30 seconds, write down what components, if William or Jackie was coming in to evaluate you and you needed to hand them a lesson plan, what things would you want your lesson plan to have? What do you know?
You want this under the nose there.
Under the nose.
Yeah.
What do you know? Everybody's still writing. I'm sorry. You guys can keep writing. I just want to give everybody some time, so hopefully you guys can do it right too. But what are a couple things that everybody has? Anybody want to share anything?
I have material procedure assessments and being addressed.
Okay, cool.
Also a proper easy to read and implement format.
A format.
Format of the lesson plan.
Okay, how to format it?
Yeah, I think, like you said, I thought about it from an administrative standpoint. You said if William or Jackie were looking at it, they should. There should be a format so they can look through it quickly and say, yes, it's got everything. Otherwise, I feel like that gives them more time to look and pick and find things that they want. If they tell us these are the 5 things and we give them the 5 things, then we move on and talk about the more important things with regard to delivery or construction, things like that.
Gotcha. Okay. More organized. Good.
I think every great lesson plan, the goal has to be stated in the beginning, and all kids have to understand what you're trying to do. By the end of the bell, you should be able to do X, Y, Z. And it's got to be stated right from the get. And why? Why are we learning this? You know, the purpose, because kids need a purpose for learning something.
Why they're learning it.
You know, why are they learning it? And you want to make it real life. You want to make it some kind of situation that's, you know, something that they can, I don't know, you want to bake the hook.
Right. Relate to it. Very good.
Modifications, differentiated instruction.
Perfect.
Thanks for the buzzwords, Mike.
Perfect. Perfect. Maybe that's anything different?
Put variety, that was the first thing.
I did too.
Variety?
That's number 2 for me.
Cool. So hang on to those, because everything you said, pretty much everything everybody said, is incorporated in this framework, and the structure is, I think, very clear. What you guys have all done with planning, especially in science, I mean, we naturally kind of do PBL. This is just kind of a new, nice, clear, organized way to organize it. That's what it is, just like Becky was saying. So, and then making sure we are honing in on things like skills. And then I don't know if you're aware, I haven't really articulated it. We are going to start meeting, I'm sorry to do this too, but we'll probably have one Monday meeting by department. So one Monday I'll meet with you guys and talk about the new standards. Literacy spans all the standards, the core standards now. So we're going to have to incorporate literacy. So this template, it's going to look very similar to stuff you already do, but it's also going to incorporate skills and it's going to incorporate literacy. So those are going to be the only things that are really new. But it's probably not stuff that's new to what you do in your class. It's just making sure that you organize it and that you reflect back on what you're doing. It's just a planning tool. So the way I decided to frame it was kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So the science teacher sent me an email saying, here's some things we want a remediation on, and ethics was one of them. So kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and I was like, well, let's take a question, and I took this little map. Science teachers are all probably familiar with it, and I made it into like a little mini PBL. And then I kind of plopped it into the framework. So really quickly, I'm not going to walk through the whole activity of it, even though I know science teachers should be excited about it. The rest of the departments don't care one way or the other. When you do a PBL, the way to structure it, just at the beginning, if you're Brian Laney, you've been doing it for forever, you don't have to do that way because Brian's an expert on it. But I like to start by by giving them something or showing a video and getting them engaged right away. Hey, Dave, were you saying that? Like getting them their attention right away. So that's why giving them a letter from the town of Hillyville, trying to make it authentic to them, trying to get them engaged right off the bat. So this is their attention getter. And then from that, having them do like a know and need to know session, which is basically like a KWL, if you think about it, based on the letter and what they know. That tries to get them to think about what they need to do to solve that problem or to solve whatever project they're doing. So for example, in this one, they're going to have to do something with pH, they're going to have to think about ethics, and Lori and I have kind of already hashed through that. And then the end goal is to get them to come up with some type of driving question. You, because you've already planned, already know what that driving question is, which is basically like your essential question. When Dave was saying goals, it's rooted in your standards, it's rooted in your goals. So think of your end questions that you'd want them to ask. If you had a test and you said, these are the big 3 questions I want them to know, can you wrap that into one nice, neat driving question? So you try to get the kids there. I actually ran this with my husband, and he's an engineer, so if he can figure it out, anybody can. And he got through this, and we read it, we did the know and need to know, and he came up with 3 questions at the end. That's okay, because it still got to that driving question that I wanted him to get to. It just wasn't maybe written as nicely as I wrote it in my lesson plan, but that's okay. So if anybody gets excited about this and wants to do this, I'm going to try it with Lori's class next week, and we're going to see how it goes and make some modifications, and that's fine. But Lori's kind of walked through it, and we have changed some stuff on it since we've talked, just to make it more. Brian Lane and I talked and changed some stuff. But so just that's an understanding how to structure when you start a PBL. That's the only reason we do things like attention getters and know, need to know, and driving questions. It's just a way to help you kind of organize it. If you've done it and you feel comfortable with it, you don't necessarily have to frame it that way. Brian doesn't because he's comfortable with it, but it's just a way to help you.
Liz, and maybe this has been covered or will be covered. Can a project-based learning situation be an individual activity by a student? Like you have them work alone?
Sure.
Just so you can gauge just exactly how good student A's critical thinking skills are versus another one. I mean, it seems to me like Brian mentioned in his that he would have high-level and low-level kids coming together, and I was just wondering, how do you know?
Yeah.
Like, like, do you see validity in doing that?
Absolutely. I think you could totally do that. Like, I don't see why. I mean, I think I put in there groups or teams, but maybe there's even and please understand this template is a work in progress. Like, I took this from Buck Institute, and I totally redid it and changed things, but I think maybe there's even a thing to put in here, because if you look, there's even a place in here that says major projects or performances, group or individual. Like, I think that there's something to be said about what the individual portion is, because we need to know how
Well, and if they're still going to be assessed with external testing, which
Right.
they are, they need to be able to answer questions like this on their own.
Right. And maybe
Time
that's what it
periods
is.
of, yeah.
And I think Brian's class itself just lends to more team.
Sure.
But and it just depends on what we're doing. Agreed. So yes,
Okay.
maybe that's a good one we
Sorry,
need
just
to.
like interrupt.
No,
and
it's
stuff.
fine. So I took the lesson and plopped it into the template and kind of vice versa, and just to kind of show how it works. So this is going to make more sense probably in a science teacher's mind than every other department that came in, but they kind of got a disservice because I couldn't make one for each department. It just wasn't going to. Sheer time I didn't have. So so I'm just going to kind of walk through the template and feel free to add in things because there's already some changes I'm going to make based on some of the other departments have been saying. So please understand that this is also not like a daily lesson plan. Think of this as like a unit plan.
Okay.
This is like bigger. So Lori and I said maybe, and maybe this might not even be this long because we want to make it a little shorter because we're trying to crunch in time for the OGT. So we might do a little mini PBL, but I said 2 to 3 days. Okay, 2 to 3 days mini unit. Maybe that's not even how long Lori and I do it. But this is more of a unit planner. This may not be a daily, this is not a daily planner, so please understand that. But that's why I put topic. And if you have had a chance, and that's okay that you haven't to look at the model curriculum, you should know that no longer do we have nice little, letters and numbers for our standards. It's a big old paragraph that you gotta have to then interpret what our big rocks are. So it lends itself a little easier to do larger scale things and think of it as the big picture and the big rocks. So, in thinking big scale. So then you just talk, obviously the top part's pretty easy. Where it says other subject areas to be included, the goal is to start getting you to think interdisciplinary. That's not to say that everything should be interdisciplinary. This one isn't, okay? If Lori and I had more time in the entire world, and yes, this could be, we could definitely take it there. Jim O'Connor saw this and started talking about something he does in geo. That would be awesome, but we realize we just don't have time for that. It's fine. I will tell you that my goals that I have written for next year for the PD plan and some of you that have been involved in the planning is that next year, this summer, when we have the course maps written and we've played with these lesson plans, is that you will spend some time looking at the new course maps, taking lessons that you already have in place, and then kind of tie them all together. This isn't about reinventing the wheel. It's about taking things you already have and then just making sure that they fit, especially in science. Guys, you already are doing this stuff. Really, we do. I mean, I just chose to do an ethics one that was new because I wanted to do something that worked in the 10th grade biology PLC. I could have easily taken something from genetics that I've already done and made it work. So understand that as well. It's converting what you already have, okay? PBL hook, I just kind of talked about what the whole hook was to get them engaged right off the bat, like we've talked about. The driving question, Brian Lean calls it the problem statement, if you want to write it as a question versus a statement, whatever works for you. I like it as a question. That's typically what you'll see the literature say about it, is call it a driving question. It's basically your essential question. What do you want the kids to know? At the end of the unit, what should they know? Your content standards, and surprisingly, the model curriculum does not talk about ethics at all, which is very interesting. Even in K through 8. And I'll have to do some more searching. So that's very interesting. I didn't see anything. I know it's not ethical. So if you flip to the next page, content and objectives, pretty easy. Everybody said something about objectives. Clear objectives. What are your goals? The thing that is different, who's done SIOP? Fishback's done SIOP with me? Did you do SIOP training?
I didn't do the training.
Well, it's okay. You did the administrative training? So language objectives, like I said, literacy spans the curriculum now. So we have to start figuring out ways that we're incorporating literacy. So language objectives are just making sure that you're incorporating reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So it's taking your objectives and taking them a step further and making sure I'm incorporating at least some of those skills. So with Lori's, can I do a written argument for why I'm going to evict one of these, components because they're contaminating the water? So how am I incorporating literacy? So typically on my whiteboard last year when I taught my SAD class, I had a content and a language objective written. I don't know if Andrew, if you did the same thing, but just to make sure. With SIOP, that's how it had to work. So then here's the skill. So that might be something slightly different. Again, we probably do this. It's just making us reflect. So when I started going through collaboration, communication, creativity, okay. When I got to critical thinking, and I think Lori and I were talking about this, I was like, I need to get them thinking higher level. I could have made it very easy and say, location Y, the farm did it, done, easy. But I said, what if we made it Z, and we start talking about the factory's an orange juice factory, and because the farm is an organic farm, the residents decided to use a bunch of fertilizers, and I talked about that in the description. So now, deciding who's going to be evicted from the Hillyville, it gets to be more of a, it's to be tougher. So depending on what the pH is, they might have to look up the pH of orange juice or whatever versus the pH of a fertilizer compared to the water sample that they have. It gets to be a little higher level. So it made me kind of go back and reflect, how am I taking it to a higher level? So it's, again, just for us to plan, how are we incorporating skills?
You can bring in, like if you wanted to bring in other disciplines, you could bring in like economics. Like if the factory was forced to shut down, what would that do to something, there's lots of levels you could take this to.
The economic impact.
Yeah, and how that would affect Hillyville. Groups or teams or individual. Orange. Oh, you did.
He didn't say that.
Groups or teams, and I think that maybe we even can add in like the individual component. And then the next page, what are the major products or performances? The thing is to add some choice into that. Like, all this is letting them have some choice. Like, even though maybe they're doing a written argument, how are they going to present it? Are they going to have to come up and do a PowerPoint, or are they going to do a rap? I don't know. But give them some choice in how they present. It's up to you. I don't know. Dave's looking at me like, rap. I know. That might not be the answer, but something else, some choice. I don't know. Just pick something. So, the attention grabber is pretty easy. It's just to get the kids engaged off the bat. There's literacy. How are you incorporating literacy? It's just kind of writing out where you incorporate it into your language objectives. Oh, I'm sorry, move up for a second. Where it says presentation to the audience, and I checked off class. For the sake of what Lori and I talked about in time, because the OGT, we're just going to present whatever to the class. However, start thinking outside the box. I know that video was crazy, and we're not gonna go swimming in the coral reef, although that would be cool. But there are ways that we can start getting resources by working with outside people. That's how Brian Lean gets some of the stuff he gets. I mean, I know Chris is working on something with him, is that correct? Yep. He does stuff with General Mills. My husband said that he'd be willing to come in and listen if an art teacher, like if Melissa wanted to redesign a label for Tide, he'd come in and listen to what they have to do. There are people that are willing to come in and work with us, and there's also money that sometimes goes along with it. I know that the problem comes with time. Talk to me, I will work with you. I've got a little bit more flexibility with my time, especially after all the OGT and we start figuring this out. I feel like I'm gonna get locked in a room doing Common Core for the next few weeks, but that's a whole other subject. But I will help you guys. But I think that's the thing you need to start being creative about. Though we can't go swimming in Hawaii, we can start thinking about who could our outside resources be. You know, Dave, I'm thinking creatively with anatomy and physiology. You know, maybe, I know you probably already have some context, but I know you did that project with the heart at the end. Like, could we get a cardiologist to come in and talk? Who are you presenting to? I mean, even if it's, could we get a cardiologist to come in? Could we get an engineer to come in and talk to you? I know Chris did that last year. Or is it just someone like Tim Dugan comes in and listens to you? I don't care, but it's just someone different than the students and the teachers, because not that they don't love you, but it's not as exciting. They just want a different face in there. You know, just start thinking about that, because it makes it more authentic to the kids if they can present to someone that's been there and done that. So just kind of think about it that way. That's another way to make it a little bit more fun and a little bit more engaging. And I'd be willing to make phone calls for you. I know with biology, especially fourth quarter, if you do bacteria and viruses, you know, the HIV guest speaker or the water contamination, we can talk about doing stuff with that. Okay, there's literacy. Again, the point of some of those small groups that we'll hopefully get back into is that they're interdisciplinary. So when you start building those lesson plans and you feel like you're getting stumped with the literacy piece, show it to an English teacher. Show it to Heidi. How do I incorporate this? I'm stuck. That's why we made those groups interdisciplinary. Assessment. Have you guys already seen Kristen?
No,
That's next. Okay, Kristen will talk to you a little bit about assessment. What are you doing during the project to check where they are? What are you doing after, or at the end of the project, or the problem? I said project. One thing just to kind of think about, have you guys heard of Poll Everywhere? Talk to Lori about it. For Lori's, I was thinking maybe at the end of the first day, if you allow, well, I don't know if allowing cell phones, but if you would let them for Lori and I said that they could text. With Poll Everywhere, it's a website that you set up, and they can text, the question would be like, which location is causing the low pH, and they could text the result, and it would show up on the screen, and it's like a poll. It's kind of like those turning points, except it's from their phones. And it's a lot easier than setting up those turning points, because sometimes there's a lot of bear to set up at the beginning, and it's free. So I also have Raymond that's interested. I know Amanda does a lot of stuff with like the digital stuff. When I went to eTech, I got a whole huge list of digital formative assessments. And I'd be willing, I'm probably going to lead a workshop on it whenever we have time to do a workshop again, but I'd be totally willing to sit down with anybody to show you some digital formative assessment ideas. So let me know, but that's just one that Lori and I kind of thought of. Then what are you doing at the end? Additional alternative strategies. I just saw Sarah. Sarah helped me with that piece. So how are you differentiating? How are you making sure you meet the needs of all students? This is where you can really have your intervention specialist dig in with you, and making sure that they're involved in your planning as well. And then resources. What are your community resources? What things do you know you need? But guys, think about it as well. Like Lori and I were like, we're gonna have to kind of let them let go. Like when they do the know and each know, and they start saying, okay, we know we need to know something about pH. And they're sophomores now. They're gonna have to figure out that they need, you know, litmus paper. They have to figure it out and ask me about it. You know, last year I would have set up very nicely, here's my litmus paper, here's my samples, dip it in, directions. No, you can guide them, but the goal of PBL is for them to discover what they're learning. I know it's a little scary at first, and it kind of depends on the class. You might have to do a little bit more guiding with others. You know, we know how that goes. But, you know, Lori and I are going to try it out. We'll let you know how it goes. But it might go better with some other. Her class is pretty good. I think,
yeah.
her class is pretty good.
Well,
So-
and it would be a lot better if we weren't under the gun and this wasn't a remediation for
Right.
OGT. You know,
Right.
if this was the first time we were doing it. we'd be
Well,
like,
and don't be surprised, I mean, when I have my kids test the effects of pH on an enzyme, my IB kids, they'll ask for blue litmus, they'll ask for litmus paper. They don't ask me for blue, they don't ask me for red, they don't ask for pH.
Right.
They ask for litmus paper. And so they have no idea what the pH is, they know it's an acid or a base, if they've even done enough research to know. So don't give too high expectations, because those are my IB kids.
have to remember that that's still where we have to come in. There's not like all of a sudden like, okay, free for all, go. Like you still say, okay, stop. Where are we with this? Let's go back. So
So one of the things that I do when they do their projects, and there's the labs that they've written themselves is they have to submit their materials and their procedures before we even go into the lab to do anything. And then I look and I ask them, I don't say this won't work, I say, how are you going to know the exact pH?
ooh, that's a good way.
So that way they go back and they look to figure that out.
And
as
maybe that's how we
opposed
do
to,
our need to know.
As
Yeah.
opposed to just, they asked for litmus paper, they looked up something online, found out what
Litmus
litmus paper
paper
was,
test.
or they asked their mom or somebody. But, and so you never tell them what they need, it's, well then how will you know this exact
Exactly.
information?
And maybe that's the way to
something
phrase
that's
it.
been beneficial.
You just have to kind of guide them there as best as you can and let them kind of discover, but, it's hard because
It takes a long time and it's difficult. I mean, honestly, the one way that I found that it takes less time is if you just give them the things to pick from.
And that might be
That's
it.
a lot easier to do. Here's the stuff, oh, I'm sorry, here's the stuff. You need some, you can even throw some red herrings in there, you don't need that. But it's there, so
Yeah.
are they gonna use it? How much research did they do
Yeah.
before they came to class?
Well, and I think that that might even be just from the pure sake of what we're doing right before the UHT and what we do. Because Lori and I have already decided for this one, we may not do like the big oral presentations just for the sake of this. But
Right.
then that might be what you need to do, depending on your class. But, I mean, as long as you're getting them engaged and getting to the driving question, they're solving it. It's
Right.
cool. Technology need it when it works. What we have, yeah. And then reflection methods. Have you've had the resource table, because Chris had all the stuff out. If you haven't had a chance to see or talk to Melissa, I don't know if you guys all know Melissa very well, but she is a huge resource that I didn't really tap into until this year. She knows so much. But she gave me some ideas for reflection methods, rather than, I think I would have just said, okay, everybody write a journal entry. But she had a big list of some ways that you can reflect other than just journal entries, other than what I just have written down here. So if you didn't get a chance to grab it or talk to her about it, you might want to swing down there when you can. So, and just so I know, like when I showed this to Lori, she was like, oh my God, it's 5 pages long. But then she's like, but wait, I don't think it's much different than what I already do. And if you look at it, the most that I wrote was copy and pasting the objectives. The rest of it's just kind of blanks and fill in the blanks. And I took, I stole some lesson plans from people, and these are actually more of a daily lesson plan that they turn in for observations. I mean, really, the length of them is not much different, and these are more of a unit planner. So kind of think about it that way. I put some time to this because I kind of created this one from scratch, but you're now talking about converting what you already have. And as science teachers, I think we have one step further because I think we kind of already naturally think this way. I just think it's even easier for us. It's just my plug for it. I think it's going to be trickier for some of the other subjects. So that's my plug for science.
Is there any information regarding what we'll be doing with the core curriculum or for forensics, body systems?
Like what's going to happen with this subject?
Yeah, like what's gonna happen with that subject if it's not something that's written up by the state?
Lori and I talked about that. I have not heard anything about that. Everything I thought would happen is that, they just won't be tested. It's
Okay.
kind of like what we have now, what I
Okay.
mean, they're just not gonna be tested.
There's no,
I haven't heard
assessment
anything
process.
changing about those at all, because
it's like for CP physics or CP chem. It's still a class, it's still a class.
They
There's
have-
just no external examination for it. I know there's a chemistry
Right,
test,
right.
but I'm just,
As far as I know, they're saying
organic
there's just not,
physiology doesn't have a test.
right, they're
From what I've
just
seen.
now, they're just not gonna be tested. It's just
Okay.
gonna be,
But
as
the
far as-
courses are still gonna be allowed.
I shouldn't quote anything,
Okay,
but
as
I've
far
not
as you-
heard
Okay,
anything
so
different.
you're still at the same place I was when we talked the last time.
As far as I know, I can ask Amy, but I'll be quite honest, I think everybody's kind of feeling like, I sat down with one of the other coaches that's probably, I think, knows the most about the Common Core standards, and she threw a desk of Common Core stuff in front of me. That's where I got that performance-based assessment. And there's so much stuff, that's why I kind of feel like maybe 2 of us are gonna get locked up doing Common Core stuff for a while, and unfortunately, I feel like it might end up being me. Because I feel like she knows the most, and then as sad as it is, I think I might know the second most, and that's not saying a lot. I mean, Craig, do you know anything about what's happening with the new courses?
I haven't had any discussion on the rest.
I don't know, I mean,
And I've expressed with you the concern I have, like what I've heard from teachers in other states that are at material science camps that I've been to. They think you have to do a course unless it's being already have that, I'm concerned they'll have both on those students.
Yeah,
So,
I have
just-
I will keep my ears open,
Yeah.
and I will advocate for whatever it is, but I do
Because
not.
as far as I know, we've got at least 5. We've got the
Electives.
4 electives,
I'll
and
ask my New York buddies and find out, because they have they have the exams like this, but they have forensics, and I don't think they have a forensics
And there's
exam,
no
but I'll
forensics exam.
double check.
In Tennessee, they create their own, the
Well,
board group.
and that's what it is, the boys
They
can't,
can get rid of all.
Yeah, because I
electives.
figure like, just because it's not, I
Yeah,
mean, it's
Right.
kind of like,
Good exam.
I think they just won't have the
Yeah,
exam.
they can't tell you what the electives have to be.
Yeah.
The electives will be physics, chemistry, or physiology, or whatever they want. It's just,
I
that's
haven't
my
heard-
concern, and we've got these classes, and I think they're serving our students well, to an extent, I'm concerned about it.
In the library, well, because of this. I have not heard them getting rid of anything. Then again, the only conversation I've had about Common Core is the other coach, and I think that's, yeah. So, but I would say,
It's the thing I'm concerned
Yeah.
about, is